Hey guys, welcome back to the Hangar. In this episode, I'm going to be showing you how I installed this toilet.
So we are going to install this toilet here in the guest bathroom. So we are going to install the toilet directly onto the urethane concrete floors that you'd seen in a previous episode. And I don't want to have to put any trim or any shims or anything underneath this toilet for it to sit nice and flat to the concrete. So it is currently upside down on this cardboard base, and if I go through here, and you can see it has these tabs that if I bring the straight edge up to they actually stick down below the outer ring that goes around this toilet, and I want every part of this outer ring to be flush to the floor. So what I have to do is I have to take a diamond grinder blade, and I'm going to grind these little feet down. Both of these need to get ground down. The ring for where the wax ring needs to get ground down, and both of these feet need to get ground down. And what that'll do is it'll allow that ring that's all the way around to sit nice and flush to the floor. So when I install the toilet with the, I'm not using a wax ring, I'm using a waxless ring, but when I install the bolts into the toilet flange and it pulls it tight to the floor, it'll allow that ring to sit nice and tight, and it'll be a nice, clean, finished look, and I won't have to put any trim or anything around it, and it should be nice and firm and no rocking to it after I get that done. Okay, so there is no longer any rock to this toilet, which was not the case before I ground all that stuff down. So let me kind of flip it over and show you what I did. Well, okay, so I ground these kind of feet, this ring where the wax ring seals, and then these feet down just a little bit so that they were all flush. And then when I turned it over, it still had some rock this way, which told me that, this back end and that front end were high. So I just very carefully, kind of ground these down, turning it back over and testing it for rock back and forth over and over again until I got it to where it sit nice and flat without any rock to it. So you can see here where I ground around on the front of the toilet. So that actually worked out surprisingly well. I was afraid of chipping it up and messing it up too much, but you got to use one of these diamond blade type cutters for your grinder, and you want to go real slow. Like, you don't put any pressure down at all, just barely kiss the face, and it does a nice job of kind of just turning that stuff into powder. So with that being done, we are now ready to go prep the drain in the bathroom by installing the toilet flange. Well, alright, so you can see I have some 4-inch PVC just stubbing up out of the slab here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a awl saw and I'm going to cut it down nice and low close to the floor, but not all the way to the floor. And then I'm going to use my Dremel tool to get inside of it, and I'm going to cut it down so that it is flush with the concrete floor. Then here I have this toilet flange that I'm planning on installing, and the way I'll install that is it should slide inside of that 4-inch PVC. So once that's out of the way, this will slide down and sit flush to the floor. Then I will line up where the bolts will come up on either side of the toilet, and I will run some screws into the concrete through these holes here that are in the toilet flange. So that is my plan, and there's nothing to it but to do it, so let's get on it. Well, okay, I ran into an issue, made a mistake trying to use something that I shouldn't have used. So the only PVC cement I had was this stuff right here. And I don't know if you can tell, but like, it is almost set up in the can. I thought I was going to be able to make it work, but this thing got, you know, part way down and it just locked up solid. So I am probably half an inch high with this toilet flange, and it is cemented into place. So I'm going to have to go get some more PVC cement and try and cut this thing out. But I don't have the stuff that I need to do that on me, so I'm going to try and do that at a later time. All right, so a little tip here if you ever run into the problem that I just ran into. So after I cut that old toilet flange off, I'm trying to get the piece of the toilet flange that I glued inside the 4-inch PVC out, so that I can install a new toilet flange. So what I did is I took my awl saw and I cut barely, I got a little bit deep on this side, but trying to avoid going into the outer PVC, I cut, in this case, about 5 slits because it's 4-inch and it's pretty big. And then using a real small blade screwdriver and a hammer, I can't do it, but I'm putting it right in that crack, and I'm going to tap it all the way around, and I'm going to remove these 5 different pieces. So that should allow me to get back to my 4-inch PVC so I can install a new toilet flange. And just like that, I am back to 4-inch PVC. Now, I'm going to probably have to sand a little bit of this up just to get that old glue out of the way. But I am back to full size, so now all I got to do is get new PVC glue, and I'll be ready to reinstall my toilet flange. So I was having problems getting the toilet flange to sit flush all the way down with the floor. So what I ended up having to do is I went down and I actually cut it probably about a 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch below the top of the concrete, and then I had to take a hammer and chisel and kind of chisel this cone around. So now the toilet flange actually fits all the way down to the floor. But here's the problem I've run into now. It's that, so when they bladed out the concrete, they obviously didn't trowel stuff away from this toilet flange, and there's a rather large bump that's been built up in the floor around that, I guess, 4-inch line. You can see that, I mean, so even with the flange sitting down flush, when I test fit the toilet, it still rocks a bit. So what I should have done in hindsight is I should have cut this down low, and then when they were grinding the concrete for the before they put the stain on, I should have had them grind in here to try and grind all this flat. But as it is now, in order for me to try and flatten it out, I could try and flatten it out with an angle grinder or something, I would have to grind a huge swath of floor to make it level all the way through. So what I'm going to do is what I was trying to avoid from the get-go is I'm going to end up having to shim the toilet. So I'm going to go ahead and put the toilet flange in here, install the toilet on it with the wax ring, and shim it so it doesn't rock. And then I'll have to cut the shims short and put a bead of silicone all around the base of the toilet so you can't see them. Well, okay, so I have the toilet shimmed up. I swapped out from wood to composite shims because they won't rust. If you look at it, the back of the toilet is actually still high. But what I got going on is the back of the toilet is actually touching, and I've already shimmed the front of the toilet up a good 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch. And I can't shim this up anymore. It'll actually start pulling the ring out of the gasket if I pick the front of the toilet up anymore. So that's just going to be as level as it's going to be. So you can tell that my dreams of not having to shim this toilet in place were never going to happen. With as much as I had to shim that front up without shimming any up on the back, I would have had to ground at least that much either concrete out from just the back side everywhere where the toilet was going to sit, or that much thickness of porcelain off the bottom of the toilet where that ring gasket sits, and I don't think that would have been a feasible idea. So I'm going to go ahead and tape off around this seam and try and get a nice clean bead of silicone that goes all the way around to kind of cover up those shims. I got pretty good shims all the way around the front on both sides. I also had to shim this left side up a little bit more than the right side in order to get it level left-right. But now the toilet is in its final resting place. It's pretty sturdy. It's not moving at all. So I'm going to go ahead and put a bead of silicone around. And while that's setting up, I'll go ahead and install the shutoff valve and the tank. Well, all right, there is the toilet installed. So please forgive kind of the sloppy silicone job here. They do make kind of flexible stick-on trim that you can wrap around the base of a toilet, and the plan is we are going to put some of that on to try and hide that, but that is all the way around underneath. It'll set up and kind of hold the toilet in place rather firmly, along with all the shims and then the 2 bolts that screw it down. So I have installed several toilets in my life, and that one was by far the most difficult. I definitely struggled with that one quite a bit. Every other time I've installed a toilet, it's been onto an existing house, so the level was either the floor was either much more level, or there was something else going on where I wasn't fighting this big hump in the floor around the drain pipe coming up. So I definitely struggled with that. Take a look at this. Super simple toilet install by Zach with only these basic tools. That's all you need to be able to install a toilet like this, It took me, it was a bit of a struggle bus for me to get it in place, but it is in place now. It feels real solid, and gotta show you, it functions exactly like it's supposed to. So rock and roll, toilet is installed. All right, guys, that is going to do it for this episode. The toilet is installed, like I said, with the exception of the trim around the base. So the only thing left to do is to test it out, but I will spare you that footage and not do that on camera. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned, and I'll catch you on the next one.